I don't really intend, Mr. Speaker, to speak for a great length of time on this issue. Mr. Speaker, the New Democratic Party in the past has brought legislation to this House aimed at providing for pensions for parliamentarians, including senators. It has brought legislation which at one time sought to make senators pensionable. And it has brought legislation, Mr. Speaker, at another time which sought to put some improvement in the conditions for all members of Parliament in terms of the pension once they serve the required period of years. Mr. Speaker, the present government, then in opposition, in relation to matters pertaining to the senators and so forth, never at any time, Mr. Speaker, agreed to any sort of pension for senators in this Honorable House. As certainly there was no contribution from the state, Mr. Speaker, for elected members who serve less than the requisite nine years in that sense, and for senators in relation to any period of time. And Mr. Speaker, there was a lot of hullabaloo all over this country in relation to that legislation. It was referred to, Mr. Speaker, the last piece of legislation in 2000 was referred to as the Greedy Bill. The Greedy Bill. It was used, Mr. Speaker, as a basis for much demonstration and protest in this country of ours. And clearly, Mr. Speaker, it contributed to the Democratic Party having a shortened term in office. Today, Mr. Speaker, it is said that the director of the National Insurance Scheme wants to change the order of things, and he is the person who is proposing and who has proposed to the government this change. Mr. Speaker, I have no way of knowing whether that is so or not. What I do know, Mr. Speaker, is that the people of this country must understand that this piece of legislation now allows for members of Parliament who have served, especially those who have served less than 9 years, and senators will now be able to get a pension contribution from the state, from the consolidated fund of this country. This is something, Mr. Speaker, that has been opposed in the past by the Unity Labour Party. All sorts of sectors in this country were brought out onto the streets because proposals there included pension for senators, when in fact there was no such proposal in the bill, but rather a gratuity of 10% after 4 years service. And today, Mr. Speaker, in this Honorable House, we find ourselves back in a situation now coming from the Unity Labour Party to provide for improved pension conditions for members of Parliament. We're now into the 4th year after 2000. All those persons, Mr. Speaker, teachers, nurses, medical association, public service union, all those persons, the public will determine that, not you. All those persons, Mr. Speaker, were brought out on the streets of this country, to protest against this. And now we're coming through the back door, Mr. Speaker, coming through the back door to bring to this Honorable House pension provisions for members of Parliament over and above what has been there before. Particularly, Mr. Speaker, in relation to a contribution from the state. What it is, we could dance on the head of a pin. That is what this means, that we are improving the conditions of members of Parliament in relation to pension. And therefore, like public officers, members of Parliament will now be eligible for an NIS pension in addition to the present pension once they serve more than 9 years. That's what it is. There's no way of hiding that. And respect, Mr. Speaker, to the senators who got nothing for their service in this country. And there are many of them, Mr. Speaker, who have passed through these doors, who have sat here for years, Mr. Speaker, not even eligible for gratuity, far less a pension. I recall Stuart Nanton in his dying days, having served 14 years in this parliament as a senator and parliamentary secretary, dying. He's gone now. Today, the same persons who were so vehement, Mr. Speaker, against the New Democratic Party for attempting to improve the conditions in relation to pensions of the members of parliament have brought this bill through the back door. What are all those persons who went on the road to think now? What are the teachers to think? The public servants to think? What are they to think? Mr. Speaker, in the so-called greedy bill, in order to provide something for senators, all that was asked is a 10% gratuity after 4 years of service in this parliament. That was not considered. That was being greedy, Mr. Speaker. That was being greedy. There was no concern about the service that those persons made to this honorable house, Mr. Speaker, because there was a broader political objective. But don't come back now to the back door and try to introduce what you condemned. I don't know what kind of barefacedness, Mr. Speaker, provides for this. I really don't know. What I do know is that this opposition will not support this measure in this house. I know that for a fact. We talk about transparency, the need to come clean, but a lot of people, Mr. Speaker, would have seen this piece of legislation and not bothered it. They won't relate it back to 2000. But we have to. The life of a government was cut short partly because of this same issue. And it was a major component of the protests in 2000 that we should not be giving anything more to parliamentarians by way of pension and gratuity. You could, Mr. Honorable Prime Minister, you have your right to say what you want. Let me say what I have to say. Okay? You know for a fact that there was opposition to this. All over this country. You can't fool people with this. You are bringing back here aspects of what you call the greedy bill in the same way that you had to do it for Mr. Skato. Because you are bringing 2 senators a pension in which the state is now going to make a contribution. So let us not fool ourselves, and don't try to fool the public either. I cannot believe, Mr. Speaker, that this government is speaking about this today. I didn't expect to see this kind of legislation, Mr. Speaker, come before this honorable house. Not at all. Not at all. So what it means is that instead of making your own pension contribution by yourself as a self-employed person, you will now pay a portion from your salary and the government will pay a portion. Under the present limits, the maximum limits for pension contributions on the NIS, I think the maximum is 3,700 or 3,770. The employee pays $94.25 per month, and the employer pays $131.25 per month. To the extent that one is paid at the maximum, the consolidated fund, the state will now pay that $131.95, thus contributing to the pension of all parliamentarians from day one that they get into this house in the future. Don't tell me that is different. There's no difference. The state is making a contribution to those pensions. Well, I know you are very learned and you are very bright and you are not blind. But the people of this country, Mr. Speaker, will read this for what it is. Bringing back pensions through the back door for parliamentarians when you fought so hard against it for partisan political reasons. That's what it is. Let us not fool ourselves about that at all. Because you are the one who talk about a government of transparency. You want me now to do something different from you.